Hi there. My name is Eugene Buzakin. My topic of exploration was epilepsy. Epilepsy is defined as when abnormal electrical discharges in the brain cause a disturbance of movement, sensation, behavior, or consciousness. A seizure has occurred. Well, we can define what seizures are next, so we can know what that is. Seizures are when a brief surge of electrical activity affects part or all of the brain. Basically, you aren't conscious during a lot of this. Some students report having an aura, like they're about to know, as you can see in the picture right here. Um, it could be like a blank stare, it could be a confused look, strange sensations or emotions, uh, and also uncontrollable jerking movements. And the most common chronic neurological condition in children is epilepsy. And I just wanted to touch on infants and them having seizures. So even infants can have seizures. It's caused by a number of things. It could be infections, trauma, prolonged labor or delivery, uh, fetal oxygen, high fevers. So it does exist in infants. So some possible characteristics, because not all children or students that have epilepsy necessarily could have these characteristics that go with it. But some do, like learned helplessness, because everyone does everything for them. Low self-esteem. That's when a student knows they have epilepsy, they think low of themselves. Social isolation. Um, kids are just, kids that have epilepsy want to maybe isolate themselves because they don't want to have an outbreak like that. And a lot of other kids don't understand what epilepsy is. I mean, there's different kinds of epilepsy. Um, so it's just maybe some misinformation among their peers. Um, Age appropriate activity avoidance. Maybe they don't want to participate in class or do any sporting events, just out of fear sometimes. So there are different types of seizures. So like generalized tonic-clonic seizure, probably one of the most familiar ones, because that's the one, um, it's kind of like the one that has little or no warning that a seizure is about to occur. The muscles become stiff and the child loses consciousness and the entire body shakes violently. I've seen that in a classroom myself. Um, yes, and then it usually lasts for like 2 to 3 minutes. Like saliva may come out, legs, arms may jerk, and the bladder and bowels may be emptied. And either the child either goes to sleep or regains consciousness afterward. There is a worry. Well, not a worry. This could happen several times a day, or maybe like once a year. Uh, they're actually more likely to occur during the day than at night. I think it has something having to do with more brainwave activities going on during the day. There's no actual medical emergency unless it lasts for a very long time, or if a seizure occurs, like one right after the other. The other kind, absence seizure, is far less severe, and it could happen as often as 100 times per day in some children. Usually they do like blank stare, flutter, or blink of their eyes. They might be pale. They might drop whatever they're holding. Uh, They might look like they're daydreaming, or maybe just not listening in class. Uh, the child may not even know they're having a seizure, and there's no actual first aid that is required, but that goes along with the disability and how not being able to concentrate in class or concentrate on anything for long periods of time, because that's happening 100 times, or so a day. The next one is complex partial seizure. It's a brief period of inappropriate or purposeless activity. They might walk about aimlessly or shout or smack their lips. They look like they're awake and conscious, but they're actually unaware of what they're doing. This can usually last 2 to 5 minutes, and afterward, the child has no idea what just happened. And then that kind of goes part of these, like some of the other characteristics of it. They might have lower self-esteem or social isolation because of things that could happen during a complex partial seizure. And then we'll go on the last type of seizure. We have simple partial seizure. It's basically characterized by sudden jerking motions, and they don't lose consciousness. Partial seizures may occur like weekly, monthly, or once or twice a year. During seizures, the teacher should keep dangerous objects out of the way. And they should not, anyone that ever has a seizure should not try to physically restrain them. So this all falls under, especially for the Individuals with Disabilities Act, it falls under other health impairments and orthopedic impairments. So OHI means having limited strength, vitality, or alertness, including a heightened alertness to environmental stimuli that results in limited alertness with respect to the educational environment. Epilepsy happens to fall under it. Actually, it says it's listed as one of the health problems, chronic or acute health problems. And this, the students can go into a IEP or a 504 plan. As far as the main Department of Education in their guidelines in Maine, it falls under other health impairment. Same type of definition. And basically, we have a list for procedure for determination. So all these steps are required. So data from general education interventions, if appropriate, using research-based interventions, techniques, indicate the response to general education intervention is not adequate. Okay, and then you have an IEP team shall consider any available written diagnosis and or educational, psychological, or medical evaluation results relevant to the identification process, and the current diagnostic criteria must have been considered in making the diagnosis. And then it also goes on, the IP team shall review the reports and observations. And then we have another part where it considers attention deficit, ADHD or ADD, and it mentions what that procedure be for that. But here it doesn't apply, although 1/4 of kids, or just about 1/4, also have ADHD that have epilepsy. And a lot of the time, if someone has epilepsy, they actually fall under another category for IEPs. Accommodations for students with epilepsy. So I found that frequent repetition of material, because there's short-term memory loss. There's a possibility of short-term memory loss, and if you're having certain types of seizures, um, that can affect you more than others. So I have frequent repetition of material. That could be throughout the day. That could be, one-on-one with someone, an ed tech, um, on their own. Um, Break up a test into smaller, brief tests instead of all at once. So um, it's important not to put a lot of stress on the student where they can go into, they can have a seizure. So if you break up the test into smaller amounts, um, into longer time frames, then there's less stress, less likely to go into a seizure, or actually it would be beneficial to them because they could think through the answers. And also I have extra time for assignments and tests. Um, so extra time meaning on assignments, like if you have, a report due on a Friday, I mean, maybe have it, due on a Tuesday, or just more in-class time, or modifications, a quiet workspace when they're working on something alone, maybe a different part of the room where the noise level is not as loud. Also, modification could be highlighting important words or phrasing on reading assignments. So if you give them a worksheet and there's important topics that, that are especially relevant, those would be highlighted, and maybe the phrasing would be. And then modified time demands. That goes along with extending time for tests or worksheets or projects and so on. So some teaching strategies that I found that were interesting was to focus less on the retrieval and more on the recognition tasks. So like if you're in math class and you have, and you're trying to teach a class about, you're doing geometry, and there's a lot of different formulas that you have for, finding out the area of a triangle or a square. I would have those formulas written down at all times. That way they can refer to those if they need to, like during a test, because a lot of the times you have to remember those formulas for tests. I think it'd be a good idea to have them written down all the time, everywhere for them. Teaching the same concepts and skills throughout the day. So repetition is key. You teach something new, teach it later throughout the day again. Just a repetition. Redirecting, that's helping students focus. Get their attention back on what's going on in the classroom. Cueing, like prompts to help remind students of task or skill. It could be something simple as a nudge on the elbow, or you could do like a whole class cue where everyone takes a break, takes a big breath, or as a chant they do. I've seen that before. And my last teaching strategy, memory learning strategies such as mnemonics. So implications, educating students and staff of anything that could trigger a seizure. So it could be flashing lights, stress, anything that maybe the child got excited about something. Any of those could really set a seizure off. And sometimes there's really no reason for the seizure to go off, but it could be the busy environment they're in. Then also implications, there needs to be a seizure action plan, and all the teachers need to be aware. Actually, all staff should really be aware, because if it happens in the hallway, everyone has an idea what to do. So this is a seizure action plan. Got the students' names and the emergency contact, the physician, and then it says what type of seizure, the length, frequency, and description. Knowing the length is really important, because then you would need to contact 911 if it goes too long. And then you have your procedure, what you would do, basic procedures. Does the student need to leave the classroom after seizure? Things like that. And here's the protocol, just to make sure. And here's the treatment protocol at the bottom during school hours. And they have medication, which sometimes they could either take it home once in the morning, once at night, or it could be midday. Or if that's the case, then there needs to be a plan with the nurse. And then you have physician's signature, and then you have a little sheet on the right, little 2 boxes here on the right where it says the seizure is generally considered an emergency when, and then it gives you a bunch of things like a student has breathing difficulties, student has a seizure in water. So, that's just to name a few on there. To go back to implications, so all staff should have seizure training. That's important. Like I said, just even if you have one student in the whole school, I think that's important right there. The other thing is being aware of the student that has seizures. You want to be aware if their medical conditions. So being aware that they have seizures, just being aware that they could have one, what the signs are. Also be aware if there's any type of depression. There is some known bullying in some cases bullying in kids that have seizures, because they're easy target. And then at the bottom, last one, monitoring student behavior. Yeah, that goes, and we just talked about the bullying. So my question for everyone, I'm curious to see, because like I said, I've had a seizure happen in the classroom, and I saw what happened and how to deal with it. But what would you do if a student who had a seizure in class while other students were present? What would your reaction be? Specifically, if in this case there's no known, it's not known that the student has seizures, and I'm just curious what everyone's thought is on that. All right, well, thank you for watching.